Welcome. Today's video is about Anno 1404, or Dawn of Discovery as it is known in the US. With Anno 1800 getting released soon, I thought I might just as well play Anno 1404 instead, since I already played, enjoyed and reviewed Anno 1701. But if this is the first time on my channel, good morning, afternoon, evening, I am StefaNonsense and gaming and geek culture is what I do. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back, I appreciate it a lot. Playing Anno 1404 for the first time now made me regret not playing it when it was initially released. It's a super solid blend of a city builder and economic simulation game, a great example of what sequels should be. It takes what 1701 did, further refining and adding to it. I will be referring to the Anno 1701 review heavily in this video, so you might want to check that out first. So let's talk a bit about the graphics. On the whole, the game is very reminiscent of its prequel. The graphics are similar, the engine is slightly improved. Similarly, the design of the buildings is a visual variation on its prequel, but it adds to the overall graphics palette the Oriental desert islands as well as their specific buildings. Not much left to say here, just that the game still looks great 10 years after its release. Gameplay. Not a lot of changes happen to the core mechanics of the game either. A couple of new things have been added that really make the game that much more realistic, let's say. But overall, the game features a bunch of new buildings, resources, items, and interactions between them. You can now trade for special objects that act as buffs for your ships, warehouses, or production facilities. By the by, warehouses still function the same as they did in the prequel. Basically, if a resource is stored in one warehouse anywhere on an island, that resource will be available from any other warehouse situated on the same island, even if they're not connected by any sort of road. The only logical conclusion being that they must have inherited some teleporter technology from some precursor race, or the Dacians. Islands now seem to be a bit larger and can have more resources on them. You can also plant seeds on certain ones and thus create an island with the plant resources you need most. The goods themselves are modified from the prequel so as to be in tune with the theme of the time period. Also, the fact that some of them can only be grown on desert islands and require you to develop a parallel society in order to do so is a very welcome addition to the gameplay, since it adds another layer of challenge to the game without actually making it more complicated. You'd think it's the same thing as simply having a larger kingdom, but in practice it's quite a different sort of experience. The challenges of growing things on desert islands are different, the costs of buildings likewise, and this means that you have to put in some extra focus on your ship routes because those critically needed resources can only come from that type of island. Which, granted, you had to do in 1701 as well, but here it requires a bit more tinkering with the routes and the timings, since there is really no way to advance the Occidental culture without a constant influx of resources from the Orient. On a personal note, one funny effect of the game is that it made me want to eat dates, but oddly enough the game's limited collector's edition comes with almond seeds, and almonds are in the game as a resource. I would have just expected it to come with date seeds, since these are the first type of food that your desert nomads will require. The other realistic sort of addition to the gameplay is the fact that in Anno 1404 your population is bound by class ratios. This means that you will need a certain number of peasants in order to support a smaller than that number of citizens, which in turn will need to support an even smaller number of patricians and then nobles. While back in 1701, you could have a town or city made up only of patricians, which from a realistic standpoint really cannot function on any sort of level. Just imagine a town where only accountants live. In fact, this feature makes it much easier to plan your residential areas as separate from production areas and whatnot, since you know that only a relatively small portion of an inhabited area can reach the highest level of development. With so much talk about patricians and extra focus on trading routes, this game reminded me of the Patrician series. The current GOG version of the game comes packaged with its expansion as well, Venice, which adds in a ton more quests to the game. These spring up considerably more often and are way more diverse than they were in 1701. One other extra thing that was added to the game, although mind you this isn't a gameplay feature per se, are the in-game achievements. These basically have to do with you managing to hit various milestones of development in increasingly difficult circumstances. The campaign. The campaign, unfortunately, is the most lackluster part of the game, I'm sad to say. And I am aware that most people don't play city builders for the campaigns, I certainly don't, but I always check them out to see what they have for me. Plus, they're generally a great way to learn the mechanics of a new game. And I really dug the campaign in Anno 1701 The Sunken Dragon, so I was kinda looking forward to this one. In the case of 1404, they also applied the more realistic approach and went with the idea of a crusade. And it's a pretty by the numbers sort of story, unfortunately. It takes some time to get started and there simply wasn't enough in there to keep me interested as much as the Sunken Dragon did. But even so, it's hardly anything close to a deal breaker. Just thought that I should mention it. The main chunk of the game is made up of the scenarios and continuous play options. Scenarios come with already created maps and different sets of objectives. These maps also vary in terms of difficulty according to which scenario you choose. Overall, the scenarios seem to be well balanced while still challenging. There's also an option for player created scenarios, but I'm not sure that functions anymore. Then there's the continuous play option, which is basically where you can play custom games. This is where you have the maximum amount of control over all the difficulty settings of the game, where you control everything from the difficulty and number of AI opponents to the types of disasters that can take place on the map, as well as the size and amount of resources that islands feature and a whole lot more. Continuous play is generally where you'll go when you want the sandbox option of the game. And before someone points it out in the comments, the game does have combat just like its predecessor, but I don't play city builders for the combat, so I don't know how good or bad it is. Sorry viewers, that's just how I roll. So, in case you want to play Anno 1800 and can't afford it, like I can't, then I can wholeheartedly suggest you get the considerably cheaper Anno 1404. And by the way, you might want to check out my Anno 1701 video in case you didn't do it at the start, or look into my city builder and strategy playlists to see some other cool titles I've reviewed. Thank you very much for watching. I've been StefaNonsense, and if you made it to the end of the video, then I suggest you maybe consider subscribing since you might dig the rest of my stuff. See you next time.